Good evening, all. Thank you very much. I can see there is no place of seating here, and thank you very much for coming for this seminar. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce Professor Saudagaran. Professor Saudagaran is Gary E. and James A. Milgard Endowed Dean of Milgard Business School, University of Washington at Tacoma. He is Secretary General of Asian Academic Accounting Association and past President of American Accounting Association's International Accounting Section. In 2002, the Japanese Association for International Accounting Studies awarded him with lifetime honorary membership in recognition to his contribution to international accounting. In 2004, he received American Accounting Association's Outstanding International Accounting Educator Award. In addition to receiving several teaching awards, Professor Saudagaran has also been recognized for his research on impact of accounting diversity on global capital markets, financial reporting in emerging markets, particularly those in Asia. He has published extensively in top international business accounting finance journals and presented his research at various conferences and universities across the globe. He consults and teaches executive seminars in international accounting and finance for corporations in Asia, Europe, and United States. Professor Saudagaran has served on editorial boards of journals like Accounting Review, Accounting Horizons, and Issues in Accounting Education. Some of you may not be aware of these journals, but these are the top-notch journals. Rather, you can classify into A++ category journals, and he has been on the editorial boards of that. He currently serves as consulting editor of International Journal of Accounting, Auditing, and Performance Evaluation, and also a lot of other journals. He serves on the editorial board. He is sole author of International Accounting, a User Perspective, a textbook used in universities over 20 countries. He is editor of a reference book of Asian Accounting Handbook, User's Guide to Accounting Environment in 16 countries. Professor Saudagaran, looking at his academic records, he has obtained his PhD from University of Washington and MBA from Iran Center for Management Studies. He obtained his Bachelor's of Commerce from University of Bombay. He is a licensed CPA in Washington State, and his previous academic position were Professor of Accounting and Director of International Business Studies at Santa Clara University, and Arthur Anderson Centennial Professor and Head of the School of Accounting at Oklahoma State University. Sir, it is indeed a privilege to have you here addressing our students. I would request our student volunteer to welcome you with flowers. Without wasting for any more time, I would request Professor Saudagaran to address all of you. Thank you.
Technology. Let me start by saying good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here. I wasn't expecting the second turn. So it's consistent with absolute delight to be in Ahmedabad. My last time here, I have no memories of. I think I was probably 5 or 6 years old when I visited Ahmedabad. So that was a long time ago. But one can't help hearing about all of the amazing things that go on in Ahmedabad, from the world of business to the world of education, this institution, in Ahmedabad across the street. So this is just a very impressive place to be in terms of everything that's going on over here. What I thought I would do today in terms of the presentation that I brought, I'm going to go over that fairly quickly just to give you a sense of our Masters of Accounting program. I was told that there would probably be some interest among the students here in that program. It's a new program for us that we're very proud of, so I want to talk about that. But in addition to that, I'm also going to talk about other master's programs that we have at the Milgauss School of Business, so that you get the whole spectrum of things that we do at the Milgauss School of Business at the University of Washington. So if that's okay, I'll go along those lines. I can go straight through and take questions at the end. I can take questions as we go along, whatever is appropriate. So that's just a part of our campus. So we call our Masters of Accounting program, the acronym is MAC. And the University of Washington is a world-class university. We sometimes get confused with that other Washington where all the bad stuff happens. In our Washington State, which is on the West Coast, we think mostly good stuff happens. We are blessed to be located in an economically very vibrant region, which has all of the names that you're very familiar with, headquartered there from Amazon to Boeing to Costco to Microsoft to Starbucks and on and on and on. But long before any of those folks set up business in the Pacific Northwest, this university existed. It's about 150 plus years old, which, trust me, in America is historic. The Indian equivalent would probably be 1,000 years, given the lack of history in the United States. So again, a world-class university. I'll talk about that a little bit more. In terms of our faculty, extremely proud of our faculty. As dean, that's one of the things that is most important to me, recruiting and retaining top-notch faculty. And you'll see in a slide that we truly have amazing faculty. A significant number of us actually have Indian roots and still maintain our ties to India. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Very proud as a public institution. Oftentimes at public institutions, class sizes can be huge, classes of 200, 250, 300. And we've made the deliberate choice to not have on our campus any classes that are larger than 50. And that to us is extremely important, and we will continue to do that. I can speak for the business school for sure at the business school. So that's I think that's relevant to the education experience. Sorry. And then for those of you who are accounting majors and interested in accounting, in the US you have what's called popularly the 5th year requirement. That is, in addition to a 4-year degree, you have to have a 5th year of higher education to be eligible to even sit for the CPA exam. And so this is an extremely important aspect of this Masters of Accounting program. Not just ours, but Masters of Accounting programs in general. So in terms of UW-Tacoma, I think I've talked about most of these things, smaller classes. We are right in the heart of downtown Tacoma. And, different campuses, different models. The previous university that I was at had, a couple of 100 acres in the middle of nowhere in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And again, in life, everything has pluses and minuses. But as a dean, to be able to be right there in downtown, where I can visit business executives, sometimes with a 10-minute walk, is a terrific situation to be in, as it is for our students who want to do internships and so on and so forth. They don't have to drive long distances to get to the employers. They're all right there. I won't go through everything else that's on there. The Masters of Accounting program, again, we're very proud that it's a very globally diverse program, and even though it's a young program, we already have students from 7 countries, including India. So coming back to that world-class university, sometimes people use those words very cavalierly, and I want to be clear, that's not what I'm doing over here. When we say that the University of Washington is a world-class university, it truly is, not because we say it is, but because that's how it's assessed in a lot of different fora. So I just picked up 3 of these. In the US, as you know, as in India, you have public universities and private universities. Public universities are obviously state institutions, and the University of Washington easily ranks among the top 10 public universities in America. Think about the fact that there are probably at least a couple of hundred public universities. Almost every state, depending on the size of the state, has somewhere between 2, 3, or 4 public universities. So regularly ranked in the top 10. But that's just in the US. More importantly, University of Washington, and you'll see a slide in a moment, is consistently ranked among the top 20 universities in the world. Okay, and this is not us saying it. This is a ranking that comes out every year out of China that says that. Then the Times of London does these rankings, and there again, these are all global rankings, and you see the fact that we are ranked in the top 25 over there. So here is the rankings that come out of Shanghai, and I mean the list is all up there. You can look at it yourself. Let me get out of the way here. And from the perspective of a Masters of Accounting program, I think I did a quick look at it, and the first 15 do not have a Masters of Accounting program. So I'll just stop at that and not press that point any further. But all of these others, they don't have, most of them don't have undergrad business programs, and then none of them have a Masters in Accounting program. So again, extremely proud of the reputation and what this university does. Now, our campus, kind of like the IIMs or the IITs, we have not that many campuses, but the University of Washington, for geographic reasons, we have 3 campuses that are in the same urban area essentially, but they were set up for providing more access. These days geographical distances don't matter, it's the traffic that matters. So you could be 15 miles away, but when somebody says, oh, it's 15 miles away, that doesn't tell you anything. My next question is, yeah, but how long does it take to cover those 15 miles? It could take 15 minutes, or it could take an hour and a half. And so that's why we have these 3 campuses, so that people don't have to be commuting long distances to access that same education. So again, at the Milgaught School, we have the following degrees, and I will talk about all of them. Start with the Masters of Accounting right now. And in the US and now globally, the accrediting body for business schools is the AACSB. And at last count, maybe 7% of established business schools, I'm not talking about somebody who puts a sign on their door and calls himself a business school, but established, otherwise accredited business schools have AACSB accreditation. And that's one thing, whether you come to us or whether you're looking at other universities, that's one thing you always want to look at, right? Is this business school AACSB accredited? Because, as happens in a lot of countries and a lot of spheres, you may have consultants and agents who are trying to steer you in one direction because that's their business model. But for you, you got to decide where you're going to invest your time and energy and your resources. And so that's one very important sign of quality that you want to consider if you ever decide to be looking at going abroad or even in India for further business education. We have, as I said earlier, we're very blessed with all of these companies, and this is just a sample. I thought I would take names that you probably would recognize. But these are all companies that are actually headquartered in the Pacific Northwest with the exception of Nintendo. But Nintendo is very big in terms of its facilities and so on in the Pacific Northwest. But I'm thinking you probably recognize at least half or more of these names, right? And they're all headquartered right in our area. And why that matters is it matters for internships, it matters for our relationship with the business community, placement upon graduation, and obviously it can also matter for placement if you decide to come back home, because a lot of these folks also are very active in India. This is, one way you judge faculty is, where they got their training and education and so on. And so our faculty at the Milgaught School, these are some of the universities where they got their PhDs and their training. And you see they are a mix of some of the top public schools in the US, but also some of the top private schools like Yale, Cornell, Chicago. INSEAD, as you're probably aware, is headquartered in France, but also has a campus in Singapore. And so again, as a dean, that's one of my main focuses, to make sure that we hire, recruit, and retain the best faculty. So the program overview, very quickly. It's a 9-month program. Our academic year starts in September, so it goes from mid-September to mid-June. We kind of rare anymore in the US, but we're on a quarter system as opposed to a semester system. So semester systems in the US tend to be 15 weeks plus a week for exams. So you have, 2 semesters, typically called the autumn semester and the spring semester. We at the University of Washington have always been on the quarter system, and so what that means is each of our academic terms is a quarter, 3 months. And so that's typically 10 weeks of classes and 1 week of exams. So we start in mid-September, go through mid-December, that's our fall quarter. We just started last week for our winter quarter. That goes from mid-January to towards the end of March. And then we have a spring break, and then we come back and we go through mid-June. And then we have a summer term. In America, most universities have summer terms that enable students to maybe speed up their graduation if that's what they're looking to do, or take certain electives that they may not have had time for in the regular academic year, and so on. Internships are a requirement, not just a desirable, in the Masters of Accounting program. They count for 5 of those 45 credits that are up there. And we, because of those wonderful relationships we have with the businesses in our area, most of our students get placed for internships. And then one of your professors asked me in an earlier meeting, what about OPT, the practical training? And yes, all students in the US getting a master's degree are entitled to get 18 months of practical training. And so that typically comes upon completion of your degree. You can. Now, I want to make very clear, I'm not promising that we'll find you the OPT, but we work with you very closely to help establish that. And it's a very streamlined process in terms of the immigration part of it and so on. That gets done at the university. We don't have to go to the government to get approval for that or anything. So, what are some of the important features of our program? I mean, there's a lot of accounting programs. What are the innovative features of our program? I think 3 very clearly stand out. One is international accounting. You saw those list of companies on an earlier slide. You could obviously add 200 other global companies on that list. And with that, international accounting is extremely important. I'm biased. That's my area. That's what I got my PhD in. That's what I've done most of my research in. That's what I do most of my publications in. That's what I teach. So, full disclosure, yes, I'm biased. But having said that, ask yourself, right? Whether it's Infosys or Tata Consulting or, US multinationals, European multinationals, I mean, that's absolutely fundamental. But I want to be clear, in our program, we don't talk about international accounting as how do they do it in Germany, and how do they do it in Japan, and how do they do it in France, and how do they do it in India. We don't come at it that way from international accounting. What we do is we look at it from a user perspective. Most of you in this room, as you progress through your careers, are going to be users of financial statements. Very few of you will actually, or auditors of financial statements, but very few of you will actually be preparing balance sheets and income statements. So that's the approach we take, which is, as a future manager, how do you use these numbers that come from various parts of the world, right? And so that's, I don't know if I'm carrying a copy of the book here. Send it around if I am, and I say that only in the context of, if you see the cover, I'm very proud. I actually designed that. But what the cover is implying is, you get all these numbers in different languages. I'm talking about the language of accounting, not the literal language. And when you add them all up, what does that mean? So if Coca-Cola is doing business in 200 countries, and they have financial statements in every subsidiary all over the world, when you put them all together, what do you get? And that's the user perspective. I'll send this around. Just want to glance through it. But that's where we come at it from. The second one that is an important feature of our program is forensic accounting. As both corporations and governments have to focus on using their resources better, forensic accounting becomes extremely important. You know, to the extent that there is the misuse of funds. I mean, a classic example right now, I just started a course in our Masters of Accounting program in the autumn on governmental and not-for-profit accounting. And we had a textbook, yeah, fine, we had a textbook, but actually I had my students read a book written by a New York Times reporter called Funding the Enemy. And what that book was about is all of the US taxpayer dollars that are being spent or wasted in Afghanistan, right? And I say wasted, I'm not being politically, I'm saying wasted from an accounting perspective. You know, a lack of internal controls, you know, money going down a black hole with nothing to show for it. You think the Americans would have learned from the Russians in the 80s with the fiasco in Afghanistan, but Americans call themselves exceptional, which means they don't learn from others' mistakes. Exactly. But that's the idea of forensic accounting, right? Millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars can be at stake, and that's where forensic accounting comes in. Sometimes it's after the fact, but sometimes it's while it's happening. And then the last one is social reporting. I was meeting with some of your professors just before this session, and one of the things we pride ourselves at the Milgard School of Business, we actually have two centers, and one is a center for corporate social responsibility. It's got a $5 million endowment. And the issue here is across countries. India probably is leading in some aspects in that new law that you just passed. But corporate social responsibility, triple bottom line, and all that stuff is becoming extremely important. So we, as stakeholders and companies, are starting to demand that they be more socially responsible. And where you see that, the accountability for that is in their corporate social reports. Right? In some countries, they're required, they're mandatory. In other countries, they're voluntary. And so we thought that if you were going to start a new program, let's be at the cutting edge of that. And so in our program, we do a fair amount with social reporting, and just as importantly, we do a lot with the auditing of social reports. As you folks move, whether you go into the corporate world or whether you go into the accounting firms, you're going to find that that is going to be a skill in high demand, which is if a company produces a social report but nobody audits it, why would we believe in it? It could just be a public relations document. Last year we planted 1,000 trees. Yay, we pat ourselves on the back. We're socially responsible. Well, that's great. But you know, how much pollution did you create? How are you? What's your environmental footprint and all of that? So this is an area that is also a focus of our program. Let me move quickly from here on. This is just to give you a sense of the program. So I told you it's one academic year, 3 quarters. So we start in the autumn, and in the autumn we have those 4 courses: financial statement analysis, taxation, advanced auditing, and then the governmental course that I just mentioned. In the winter quarter, which is the quarter we are in right now from January to March, we have tax research, advanced topics in financial, the internship that I talked about. Why do we do it in the winter quarter? Because when are accountants the most busy? Quarter, right? December 31 year end. Financial statements have to be prepared, so companies need help, auditing firms need help. So it's not the only time that our students can do an internship, but we find that's when companies have the most demand for interns. And so that's why we do it then. And then planning, control, and performance evaluation. And then the spring quarter, business regulation and communication, financial accounting theory, advanced international accounting. And so that's the program, right? Fall, winter, spring, 9 months. Again, start mid-September, get done in June. The internship, I won't spend too much time on the slide, right? We said it's required. The internship, you know, you can't work in McDonald's or KFC and say, hey, professor, can I count that for my internship? The answer is no. So it has to be, unless you're working in McDonald's financial reporting department. Absolutely. But other than that, it has to be accounting or tax related. So we're very particular about that. Obviously, real world work experience, you get 5 credits for that. And they generally last 1 academic quarter. We have students who do it in other than the winter quarter because that's when that particular employer was interested. So, again, in entry into the program, it's a requirement pretty much everywhere in the US. You need a 16-year education, so a BCom plus 1 year beyond that. That would be the 16th year. Or a similar program. We obviously require the GMAT, we require the TOEFL, and then we require prerequisites before you start our program to have courses in those areas. Now, I hear this from universities in several places. I was most recently in Istanbul, and they said, but our undergrad program is not that accounting intensive. Say we get that, and so if you don't have all of those accounting prerequisites, we've created something called the Summer Accounting Bridge Program. And so rather than have you go through, all of those courses, which would take, several months, if not a whole year to go through, and we realize that's not very efficient for somebody who already has a degree. What we do is we have this intensive program in the summer, right? So I said the program starts in September, the degree program. So in the summer, 2 months before that, we offer this bridge program for those students. And it's not just for international students, I want to be clear. In the US, we have students who went and got a bachelor's in fill in the blank. And then they found they couldn't get a job with the bachelor's in that fill in the blank. Psychology is my favorite example, but I won't say any more. I'm a psychology major. Okay, great. Good for you, but they go out there, they find they can't get a job. And so then they want to kind of come back and get a degree which makes them employable. So even those students would take this bridge program, right? And so very quickly, I wouldn't go through the details, but that gives you a sense for the program. It's intensive. We make no secret about that. What it took regular bachelor students 2 years to study, if you're going to do that in 2 months, you are superwoman and superman. We get that, but you still have to go through this stuff, right? So it's not just cosmetic in nature. But again, we've designed it where you come a couple of months earlier and you get that done, and then you have all the prerequisites for the master's program. I won't go through the details of this. It's on our website. You can look it up. All of the things that you would expect to need: transcripts, admissions essay, resume, TOEFL and GMAT scores. I'm very proud to say that we have again, because we have a $20 million endowment at the Milgard School dedicated to scholarships, and really ours is a meritocracy. So we base our scholarships. We don't take our applicants and our students for granted. We realize that we have to compete for the best and brightest students. And so that's how we use our scholarships. We use them strategically, and we use them to attract top quality students. So, and I don't make any distinction. A lot of universities, international students in the US I'm talking about, are not eligible for scholarships and so on, but we simply do not do it that way. So for us, we just want to get the best students, regardless of whether they're domestic or from outside the US. And if they're great, and if they have, wonderful grade point averages and strong GMAT and TOEFL scores, we want them because we want that global diversity. So I just want you to not lose track of that. So again, in terms of, even though we do admit students, but it's mainly domestic students in the spring quarter, starting in April, we don't do that for international students. Because then, you start, you have 1 quarter, and then you have downtime for a whole summer. And summers in America, tend to be long, about 3.5 months, the academic summers, right? So we break in mid-June, and we don't come back till the latter part of September. It doesn't make sense to bring in an international student and then have them just, doing nothing for 3 months, 3.5 months. So then you go back home again, and then you come back again. So for our international students, we only admit them in the autumn, You got some dates over there in terms of the deadlines and such. Cost of attendance. We've been very cost conscious when we've designed this program, and so that's what the tuition is for this one-year master's program at the Milgott School of Business. MBA programs generally run about 2.5 times that. But this again, my bias, I'm an accountant, and we wanted this program to be really top-notch and yet to be something that was accessible. So remember, that number is before any scholarships. If you were one of the students that we really wanted, then obviously some scholarships would be available there. Now obviously tuition is not the only cost. We recognize that if you're going to come to the US, there's housing and so on and so forth. That gives you a sense of approximately what the cost of housing would be. So again, just to wrap up, why, if you're thinking of doing a master's program in accounting, if you're looking for a career in accounting with, I would say, multinational companies of all stripes, whether they're Indian multinational companies, whether they're European or American multinational companies, that's kind of what we gear this program to. And then all of those other things I talked about, right? World-class university, top-notch faculty, small class sizes, CPA, and then obviously the masters. What I'd like to do now, Dr. Trivedi also asked me to talk a little bit about our other master's programs. So I'll keep that fairly brief, and then I'd much rather respond to your questions. So on one of those earlier slides, you saw there were 2 other master's programs. We have MBA. Every respectable business school has an MBA. Our MBA program is a 2-year program. It's for working executives. We've designed it that way, right? And so in our MBA program, 100% of our students are fully employed. And this is a very motivated group. So they put in an 8-hour, 10-hour workday, and then they come for classes after that. And then classes run from 6 p.m. to 9:45 p.m. So it's not something that you do for fun. It's not a hobby, believe me. Most of these people have a full-time job. Many of them also have families and so on. And that's our MBA program. As I said, it's a 2-year program. And in terms of the cost, it's right around, the tuition and so on is right around $51,000, $52,000, just in that ballpark. Well, we're very proud of that program. We have a number of kind of areas, if you will, in that program. One is the CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst. We have some very big financial institutions in our footprint, so that makes a lot of sense for them. Another thing that we are just launching this coming fall is a healthcare track in our MBA program. We have, right in our town in Tacoma, we have 2 healthcare organizations that are each of them is in excess of $1 billion in revenues. So these are huge organizations with thousands of employees, and that's our way of reaching out to them. And so we also have a healthcare track in our MBA program. And then we have, like a lot of MBA programs, we have kind of a global business track. And then we're also very strong in the area of change management. Some of our faculty that you saw listed from the universities they came from, that's their focus, change management. And throughout our programs, whether it's the Master's of Accounting or the MBA, we weave in this whole area of corporate social responsibility. We just don't believe in a isolated course, isolated checkbox approach to CSR. Really, CSR is important, whether it's in accounting, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in management, whether it's in finance. We all have to be socially responsible. Nobody is exempt from that. And so that's why that's also pervasive in our MBA program. 2 years ago, we just launched another master's program. We're very careful when we launch programs. We don't just launch programs to add to our menu of programs. We launch programs because we look at their relevance, we look at the prospective demand. And if I use and I don't mean to be crass here, but if I use a production model, if nobody's going to buy this book, why would you produce it, right? It just doesn't make sense. And so in all of our degree programs, we look at what happens to that student upon graduation, right? if somebody, I'll use this as an analogy, if somebody was a barista at Starbucks before they came into our program, and after they graduate from our program, they're still a barista at Starbucks. We got a big problem, right? Because what was the value added? So in the business school, that never happens. That happens to the history major, right? which I won't talk about anymore. So again, as we look at new programs, we're always looking at relevance. And so one of the new programs that we've just launched in the past year is a Master of Cybersecurity and Leadership. And if you've been following some of the things that have been happening in the US just around Christmas time, Target, Neiman Marcus, and the military, and on and on and on, cybersecurity is extremely important. We have a big military base about 10 miles from our campus. For them, cybersecurity also is very important. And so we've just launched this Master of Cybersecurity and Leadership. Very similar to the MAC in that it's also a one-year program. It's a very similar price point as the MAC, you know, $21,000, $22,000 in terms of the annual tuition. And we're already seeing a lot of interest in that program. So with that, I've been talking altogether too much, and now I'd like to see if you have any questions on anything, either what I addressed or anything else about our university or anything in general. So clear, or you slept through it. I don't know which one. So yes.
PhD education, like
Okay.
some doctorate degrees or something.
Can you just repeat the question so that everybody else hears it and I hear it again?
My question is like there are many universities in US itself, like MIT, as I was checking the website, they offer a direct doctoral program after our undergraduation, like 12+4 system which we have here. So does the university itself offers like such course or some doctoral degrees?
Well, yeah, the university offers a lot of doctoral degrees. But I want to be careful. In the world of business schools, you used MIT as an example, and that's a great example. But when you use MIT, you're talking more about technology and engineering and so on. In the world of business schools, it almost never happens, for a good reason, that somebody goes from a bachelor straight into a PhD program. In the research-oriented PhD programs, the whole idea of a PhD program tends to be in business, right? Tends to be that you want a career in academics. And as much as I know you love all your professors, it's a little too early at age 21 or 22 to make the decision that I want to spend the rest of my career in academics. Now, in those technical areas, it makes sense. You know, in engineering and so on, it makes sense, computer science. But in business, you know, typically, by US standards, I was very young when I started a PhD program, but that was, I'd already had 5 or 6 years of experience with Ernst & Young and so on. And even then, I started my PhD program when I was 26. But that was highly unusual. That's not representative. Most people who start PhD programs will be in their early 30s, right? And so for that reason, while we have a lot of PhD programs, if you're thinking of staying in the field of business, I wouldn't recommend that. You want to go out and get some real world experience before you decide you hate it so much that you want to become an academic and take that as your career. So. Yes, sir. That's a touchy one. We in our MBA program and in the MAC program, what we look at is we look at the portfolio. What I would love to say is what GMAT I would, huh?
The SOP?
No, the portfolio in the sense of, what's the student's undergrad performance, how have they done, in their undergrad education. And then, yes, we look at the standardized tests too. But as now putting back my dean's hat, what I think it's fairly comfortable for me to say, a 600 plus GMAT would get you into the MAC. A 700 GMAT, I'll make this promise and I know I won't regret it. The 700 GMAT and you'll definitely get a scholarship. Yeah.
Do you look at IELTS also or only TOEFL for English?
What's the other one you just mentioned?
IELTS. Generally Canada, US do not look at
I'll be honest, full disclosure, I'm not very familiar with that. Okay. But if it was a test that was universally accepted, I don't see why we wouldn't look at it. But historically, it's always been the GMAT and the TOEFL for us. So. One is it's a kind of a binary thing, right? Either, and all we're trying to do is say, hey, will the student be successful in the program? And the good thing about the GMAT, if I had my way, if you're doing a GMAT, I wouldn't even worry about the TOEFL. Exactly, right? Because absolutely. The bar of the GMAT is so much higher that I wouldn't worry about the TOEFL. But that's kind of the university's requirement at this time, not to say it's etched in stone. I'm sure we could look at the IELTS stuff too and then look at this one.
And another thing, for the cyber program which you said, cybersecurity program, do you require any other this thing or only a graduate, any graduate would do?
No, you do need some of that technical background, and I'll be happy to email that to you when I get back home. That technical, it's in collaboration with our computer science department.
That's why.
So that part kind of they came up with, and we don't want to look over their shoulder, let them do their thing. We take care of more of the quote-unquote MBA side of that program. Right? When the military first came to us for this program, they said, we don't just want the technical part. We want these people to also be trained in some of the soft skills, negotiation and strategy and all of that. So we handle that part of the program, obviously, in a lot of dialogue. So these are not just detached courses. Our faculty members work very closely with the faculty members in computer science. But yeah, so there's got to be some technical requirements for the student to be successful in that program. A history major would not be admitted into that program. I don't have anything against history. I'm just talking about the viability in terms of certain professional programs. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
Are people from any background are accepted? Because while you were presenting, you said Bachelor of Blank, so I was rather...
For the MAC? Are we talking about the Masters of Accounting?
Yes.
Yeah, as I said to you, remember that summer bridge program? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then somebody who did not have a bachelor's in accounting, almost doesn't matter whether their bachelor's was in marketing or whether their bachelor's was in history, they would have to do that summer bridge program. Because what we care about is that, again, all this is not about putting barriers in the student's way, but why would we bring somebody in who didn't have the preparation to succeed? And so that's why that bridge program, we feel, is very rigorous, it's very solid, and it would give that person the necessary background to start with the MAC in the September. Yes, so whether it's a non-accounting major or whether it's a non-business major, we would certainly look at them for that program as long as, so it would almost be like a conditional acceptance based on successful completion of that bridge program, right? Other questions? So just to get a sense, and I'm not asking for any commitment and I'm not asking you to sign your life away, I'm just trying to get a sense. So from what you heard today, how many of you would think, hey, yeah, this is something I want to think about? Obviously, I'm not willing to decide now, but yeah, this has some appeal and this is something I would like to think about. I'm just trying to get a feel for us to learn and to see, what the program currently is like. As I mentioned earlier, currently we have students from 7 countries including India program. But just trying to get a sense from you. I heard wonderful things from your professors before I came in here as to how selective this institution is in the students it admits and so on and so forth. So we obviously would love to have that caliber of students. But how many of you think that, hey, this could be an interesting program looking forward? Let's raise your hand if that program has any interest to you. Okay. How about those other ones, the cybersecurity? Okay. Good. How about the MBA? No, that's great. That's wonderful. No, I think I was discussing with Dr. Trivedi as we were walking up here. I think what you're starting to see is you're starting to see the students who still want to do the MBA, right? And hey, MBAs are well designed and well conducted MBAs are marketable for a reason. But then on the flip side, you're also starting to see some subsection of the population saying, I want something even more specialized than the MBA. And so we're starting to see in the US as well as I'm sure other countries, a lot of one-year, very specialized rather than broad-based master's programs emerging. So the Master of Accounting, the Master of Cybersecurity and Leadership, the Master of Finance, the Master of Risk Management. And you're starting to see a lot of that specialization. I think it's choices, education in certain fields can be pretty expensive in all of the professional fields. And so people are making the choice and saying, I think this is what I want to do, and so therefore I want to get a degree which specializes in that. And so, as I said, the MBA, great, provides a lot of wonderful tools. Other programs, a lot more specialized, tend to be half the time and half the cost generally. MBAs are 2 years, and so whatever the price tag that comes with that. The one-year master's programs, again, they're 1 year, so they tend to be shorter. Yeah. Sir, thank you so much.
Dr. Saudagaran, thank you very much for coming down and making this presentation to our students. As you rightly said, we have a few students who raised their hands when you asked about Masters in Accountancy. But the probable issue is probably they are not aware of this evolving specializations. I am sure what you have done today would be of great service in making people aware that apart from the generic MBA, the job market now requires people with focused skills, and there are wonderful employment opportunities which are coming up. I am sure with this talk there would be a lot of interest which would be sparked, probably which was missing till now, and we'll have a lot of our students who will be taking up this program in the future. So with that, I thank you very much for coming down out here and sparing time and sharing the knowledge with our students. Thank you, sir. Thank you.